Hi, it's Hope and welcome to the video. I apologize for being in this, I'm sitting in my desk, not by the bookshelf, but this will be my August wrap up. You may notice I didn't do a mid-month wrap up. That is because I just didn't have the time or the energy to do it, so this is going to be quite long, and I'm just going to kind of speed through all of the books because, as you probably saw by the title and the thumbnail, there's a lot of books because there's a lot of pages. So first we'll go into my stats like I always do. I'll pop them up here. So I read 29 books in August. Don't ask me what I did with my life. The answer is reading, which ended up being 10,010 pages. Yes, I read over 10,000 pages. This was my best reading month ever. I think previously my best reading month was 27 books and then 9,000 and some pages. This is definitely the best reading month. I highly doubt I will ever top it. The average star rating was a 3.9, so fairly good. I listened to 1 audiobook, 18 ebooks, 3 mixed, which basically means that I listened to either the audiobook and a physical book or the audiobook and an ebook. So yeah, and then I read 7 physical, 12 of which were adult, 1 was a middle grade, 4 were new adult, and 12 were young adult. And then for genres, 3 were contemporary, 2 were dystopian, 1 was erotic, 7 were fantasy, 4 were graphic novels, 2 were paranormal, 8 were romance, 1 sci-fi, and 1 thriller. So definitely a lot of different genres I hit, which is good because of the amount of books that I read. So if I look up here, I literally have my spreadsheet right behind the camera, and also it would be impossible for me to remember 29 books. I mean, I was literally going through my stats last night and being like, I read a sci-fi, I read a thriller, what? I read what? So yeah, forget half the books that you've read. This is why you keep a spreadsheet with everything you've read and the ratings and everything. So the first book I read this month was Conclave by Penelope Douglas. This is the 3.5 novella in the Devil's Night series. And basically the Devil's Night series, you will hear this series mentioned a few times. But basically it is a dark contemporary romance series it's new adult, borderline adult. The first few books are new adult, but then the final book could be kind of classified as adult, and it's just dark romances. This is a novella that takes place between book 3 and 4, and this I gave 4 stars. It was only about 100 pages, so not that much happened, so I felt like a 4-star was good. It kind of felt a little unnecessary to me, but I will take every ounce of content with these characters that I can. The next book I read is Purple Hearts by Tess Wakefield. And this essentially we follow Cassie and Luke, and they form this idea for a fake marriage because Cassie is a diabetic, unable to afford her medication, and Luke is going into the Marines, and if they marry, he will get an additional money, plus she will get her health insurance covered, meaning that she'll be able to get her supplies. And this is highly illegal, so they have to fake a marriage. And yeah, I absolutely love this. I gave this 5 stars. I read this in 1 sitting. I absolutely loved it. The only reason I read it was because of the movie that came out at the end of July. I read the book, watched the movie, absolutely loved both. I will say I definitely see why people don't like it because it is very obviously heavily military, and Luke and Cassie come from very different backgrounds that clash at times, but I still enjoyed it. My opinions are my opinions. If you do not like them, well, tough luck. The next book I read is Unravel Me by Tahira Mafi. This is the 2nd book in the Shatter Me series. So basically in the first book, Shatter Me, we follow Juliet, who her touch is lethal, so she ends up being put basically in an insane asylum because people don't know what to do with her really. But then she ends up getting basically the reestablishment, which is the government, basically wants her to use her ability, and yeah, and this follows after all that happens, after she has escaped and now things are happening. And I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely love the Shatter Me series. I know they're very cliche and very like, very tropey, but I love them. This was the late night bookworming book club pick for July, so I needed to read it because I'm a part of that book club. I will link the live show that was on Morgan from Morgan's Bookshelves channel. I'll leave it linked in the iCard, I always forget which side, and the description, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts, the thoughts will be there. Next, I read Ravensong by Charlie Nottingham, and this is like a paranormal why choose romance with like poly elements. And this basically we follow, in the first book, which is Raven's Cry, we follow Rain, who she's a witch, and she basically gets hired by this vampire named Ezra to rid this mansion of ghosts, and in doing so she ends up starting to fall for Ezra, but she also has feelings for her childhood best friend and roommate Graham, and things get very involved. This series so far is very like complex because there's like vampires, witches, fae, necromancers, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars because there were some things that just didn't feel right, but I still really enjoyed it, and I can never go wrong with like a paranormal romance. Any sort of romance, I'll take it, especially if it's a why choose romance. If you know me, you know I like anything like that. The next book is Marshmallows by Louise Willingham, and this does not come out until November. I got this as an ARC, which I literally still am like shocked that I got an ARC of it because I loved the first book. So the first book is Not Quite Out, which I honestly should have grabbed my physical copy because I do own it. Basically, in Not Quite Out, we follow Will, who isn't out to his friends, isn't out to his family, anything like that, because he doesn't feel like coming out because he knows that he's not going to be in a relationship anytime soon, so why bother? But then he meets Dan, who is a recovering addict who goes to his university, and the two of them become friends, and then that friendship they realize maybe might be something more, and it's the two of them dealing with their different issues. And I gave the first book 5 stars. I gave Marshmallows 5 stars. It's literally just a fluffy novella that takes place over like a 2-day period. It's the cutest thing on the planet. I absolutely love it. But even though it's so short and so sweet, it still deals with difficult topics. So yeah, I absolutely love this. I'm going to be getting my hands on a physical copy when it comes out on November 17th, I think is the release date. So yeah. The next book is Covet by Tracy Wolff, and this I gave 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. Covet is the 3rd book in the Crave series, which essentially we follow Grace, who she ends up having to go to this boarding school in Alaska that is ran by her uncle after her parents pass away. And little does she know that this school is a school for paranormal people. And yeah, also if you can hear any noise in the background, there's obviously my fans because it's super fucking hot, but also the TV is literally on the other side of this wall, and my dad's currently watching TV, so I'm not sure if you can hear it. So yeah, but Covet I absolutely loved. I love these characters so much. I just love everything that's going on. I'm currently reading Court, which is the 4th book, and I'm loving that too. The next book I read is Burdens We Carry by Dana Isley. This is a smutty, erotic novella where essentially we follow Aurora and Owen, and they are in this arranged marriage by their parents, and the two of them end up getting married and then realizing, oh shit, you are attractive, I might like you, and then you see them on their wedding night. It's kind of stupid. I gave it 3 stars though, but I read anything Dana Isley writes because I do like her writing and the way that it's easy and it's always smutty, and sometimes you can never go wrong with just like a smutty novella. Like, don't at me. And then we have Nightfall by Penelope Douglas, which is the 4th book in the Devils and Night series. I've already kind of talked about it, but this specifically, we follow the characters Will and Emery, and I like these books because you see in the past, I think in this book it's 9 years in the past when they first meet and first start interacting, and then present day, and I gave this 4 stars because honestly, Will and Emery, I think, are my least favorite couple of all of the couples in the Devil's Night series, because there's like 4 different couples and a book for each of them. So I kind of disliked Nightfall because I felt like it was too long and the ending was too confusing. So, but I still love it. I still loved it, but it's only 4 stars. I also read Lore Olympus Volume 2 by Rachel Smith, and this is a Greek mythology graphic novel where we're following Hades and Persephone, and it's basically a retelling of, it's not even really a retelling, it's more of like their story in a modern setting, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It's basically just slow burn for the entire thing, and I love that. Normally I'm like, I don't like slow burn, but with this, like with Hades and Persephone and this, it's just like, it's just amazing. And I'm honestly, I said this when I read Volume 1, that I will continue and read them on Webtoons, because I did read it on Webtoons. But I think I'm just going to kind of read the Webtoons as the volumes come out so that I can count them on Goodreads. But the next book I read is Forging Silver into Stars by Bridget Kemmerer. I did have a physical copy, but I was borrowing that from my library. I will at some point be getting my hands on a copy of this book because I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. This is the first book in the spin-off series from the Cursebreaker series, but you can read Forging Silver into Stars without reading the Cursebreaker series. But essentially, Forging Silver into Stars, we follow Callan and Jax. Are those the characters' names? I've read way too many books that I can't remember names. We'll go with that. We follow Callan and Jax, and they are from this small town, and Callan runs a bakery, and Jax it helps his father at the blacksmith. And when a mysterious person asking them to hold letters comes through town, they agree because they need the money, because they need the money. And also we have Taicho, who is the king's courier, which basically he delivers letters from the prince to the king because they're in 2 different countries. And he ends up stumbling upon Jax and Callan, and things go from there. And I love this because I just love the characters. I love how there's disability rep, because Jax lost his foot as a teenager, I think, at 13 or something. It also has a queer relationship, which I did not expect. Very happy with that. And also, I just love the character dynamics, and I love the world, and I already want the second book so bad, but the first book just came out, like, in June, was it, I think? So, I definitely will be pre-ordering the second book whenever it's announced. The next book is The Feeling of Falling in Love by Mason Deaver. This essentially followed Neil, who was originally supposed to go to his brother's wedding with his best friend, Josh, who is also his friends with benefits, but when Josh admits feelings for Neil, Neil is just like, no, don't feel the same way. But he still needs somebody to go to his brother's wedding with, so he ends up recruiting his roommate Wyatt, and Wyatt kind of doesn't want to go, but Neil pays them, so the 2 of them have to travel for Neil's brother's wedding, and then it's revealed that they both have feelings for each other, and they develop, and yeah, it's just kind of, this is a cute contemporary queer book, but it also deals with strained families, the struggles of one character being trans and the other not quite realizing what their gender is, the struggles of realizing that you can have feelings for somebody even if you don't want to. It was just really cute. I enjoyed it. It was I don't have much more to say. I enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. I've given everything that I've read by Mason Deaver 5 stars, so wasn't surprised that this was a 5 star. Then I read My Summer Fling by Dana Isley, and basically we follow Millie, who ends up planning her brother's wedding with the help of her brother's best friend Noah, who she has history with, and in planning the wedding together, they end up developing feelings for each other, and it's just the kind of like short, it's about 170 pages of just a cute romance. I liked it. It was smutty. I gave it 4 stars. I don't really have any other thoughts on it. Next, I finished The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. I say finished because I started this book in June, and then I finally finished it in August. And I think it took me like 61 days to finish. And this essentially, the witches control the atmosphere and like the weather and all of that, and things are going wrong, and we are following Clara, who is a ever witch, which basically means that she can control weather in every season, unlike normal witches that can only do it in one season. And Clara just wants to kind of fix things, but also deal with her magic because her magic is slowly losing control. And yeah, I enjoy this. I gave it 4 stars. I like the romance between Clara and the love interest Song, and it was an interesting read. I definitely enjoyed the audiobook better than the ebook because at first I was just reading the ebook, and then I only got about halfway through, and then I picked up the audiobook, and it was so good, so I'd highly recommend the audiobook if you are an audiobook listener. Next we have Lauren Lust by Carla Nicole, and this is a vampire queer romance. We basically follow Haruko, who basically he has been very isolated from the vampires, and when he finally gets back into the vampire world, he ends up meeting another vampire named Nino, and I think that's his name, and the two of them form a friendship that ends up turning into more, and yeah, it was cute. 3.5. I gave it a 3.5 because while I like the characters, I feel like the world development and the development of the vampire lore was a little bit confusing at first, so I didn't grasp it, and also the first half was really slow and then the second half was really fast, so I felt like the pacing didn't quite work great, but I still enjoyed it. Next, I read Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is another book I read in one night and I gave 5 stars. This essentially follows Lowen, who is a writer, and when she is offered a contract to finish another author's work because she is unable to, she ends up doing this, and she ends up traveling to the author's house. The author is Verity, and she ends up staying with Verity, her husband Jeremy, and Verity's son Crew, and Lowen ends up staying with them because there is all these notes in Verity's office, but nobody really knows what's what and all that. So Lowen goes and does that, but then there's a mystery, and like things don't start adding up, and there's so much going on, and I don't know how to describe it anymore without spoilers, but I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. It was just like, from page 1, I was like, I need to finish this from the moment I started it, and if anybody asks, I am team manuscript. You'll understand what that means if you have read the book and know what it means. Basically, you're either team letter or team manuscript. I'm team manuscript. The next book I read is We Will Always Have Summer by Jenny Han. I gave this 3 stars. I'm not really going to talk about this that much, but this is the 3rd and final book in the Summers trilogy, which the first book is The Summer I Turned Pretty, which basically we follow a love triangle between Belly and Jeremiah and Conrad, and Jeremiah and Conrad are brothers, and the thing is, I wanted to gouge my eyeballs out while reading this, but I was listening to it, so I'm like, I just didn't like anything of it. The only reason I gave it 3 stars is because I liked the characters and the drama, but the overall plot, I was just like, can we just not? Honestly, it probably should have been like a 2-star, but I'm gonna stick with the 3 stars because that was my gut rating, so yeah. Next I read Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas, and this is the 4th book. Yes, I did think. This is the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series, which I'm not going to talk about this that much, but I absolutely love this. I gave this 5 stars. I tabbed the absolute loving crap out of this, and I honestly could have tabbed more, but I was running out of tabs. But this I absolutely love. The first book is Throne of Glass, where we follow the assassin Selena Sardothien as she is imprisoned and is given this option to get out of prison by taking part in this assassin competition to become the king's champion, which basically would be the king's assassin, and then after like 5 years she would gain her freedom. And this is way off from that description, and I absolutely love this series. I'm so happy to be doing a reread, and yeah, I feel like I could spend forever talking about this, but I love it so much. So yeah. Sorry if the camera angle changed. I had to take a phone call, so I had to pick up my phone. But the next book I read is Fire Night by Penelope Douglas, and this is the 4.5 final book. It's a novella in the Devil's Night series. So I finished this series. It was bittersweet. This is like a novella that takes place, I think it's like 9 or 10 years after the end of Nightfall, and it gets a 3-star. It was unnecessary. I felt like it set up things for a spin-off, but I'm pretty sure Penelope Douglas has confirmed that there is going to be no spin-off, so I don't know. It felt entirely unnecessary, hence why I got the 3 stars. Next I read Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver, and I gave this 2 stars. And funny thing is, I watched the movie last night, and the movie also fucking sucked. But this, essentially, we follow Samantha Kingston, who she ends up reliving the same day, February 12th, also known as Cupid's Day, at her school. Just entirely, she relives it and is trying to fix things. And I wanted to DNF this. I'm upset that I didn't DNF it, and I just hated it. 2 stars is being generous. I don't want to talk more about this. I will definitely be unhauling this. The next book is The Roommate by Rosie Dannon, and this I gave 4 stars. And the bare basics of this book is we follow Clara, who she basically moves from New York to LA, or at least I think it's New York, somewhere around that area, to LA to get a fresh start away from her overbearing family. She ends up having a roommate named Josh, and it's the two of them being roommates, becoming friends, creating a business together, and falling in love. And I'm gonna let you figure out everything else, but I enjoyed it. I loved the character developments, the character dynamics. I love that Josh has a career that I've never seen anybody in a book have and never been discussed. I guess I'll say it, Josh is a porn star, so that adds a bunch of conversations of things, and does kind of link to what the company they create is. One thing I did like also about this book is that basically he fell first. I always love it in books, especially when it's dual POV, where you see him falling for her first. Like, she's like, oh, I think I might like him, and he's just there like, I love that woman. And I just love that. The next book I read is Enders by Lissa Price. This is a sequel to Starters, where essentially in Starters we follow Callie, who there has been this outbreak that has killed most people between the ages of 19 and 64, and basically there's now been this invention that can put the mind of a elder into the body of a teenager. And Callie does this because she would get a lot of money, and she needs the money to support her brother, and her best friend. And when she does this, her experience goes wrong, where she wakes up in her body when the elder should still have control, and there's a mystery on why. And this, we continue. I don't really want to talk about this that much. I didn't really like it. It was going to be a 2 stars, and then there was a plot twist where a character was actually somebody else that I didn't expect. So that plot twist is the only thing that gave it a 2.5. But I don't regret reading it. I'm glad I read it because it finishes off a duology. And yeah. The next book I read is The Darkness Outside of Us by Elliot Schweifert. This I gave 5 stars and absolutely loved. Basically, this we follow Ambrose and Kodiak, and they are from 2 rivaling countries on Earth, and they end up having to travel to Titan together to save to save an astronaut that has been put on Titan and has now sent a distress signal. But when they get aboard and they wake up not knowing how the launch happened and how long it's been since the launch. And then there's these other little mysteries that they come across, and this book for the first about 40% was me just going, what the fuck is going on? Because it was like things were happening and it all wasn't making sense. And then around the 45% mark, my brain basically exploded of a thing happening and then other things happening because of it, and then just everything unfolding, and it was amazing. Honestly, might be on my top 10 books of the year, because once I got to about the 45% mark, I was like, I need to finish this book. I need to know what all this means and how it makes sense. And I just loved it. I also loved like the character dynamic between Ambrose and Kodiak, and the way that they don't like each other at first and then realize, hey, we're kind of stuck. And I also love how just everything happened, and honestly, this author would have had to figure out so much details, and I honestly am like, it's just amazing because of all the details. The next book I read is Stormbreak by Natalie C. Parker. This basically, the first book is Seafire, which I also should have grabbed because I own it. But Seafire, we basically follow Caledonia, who she is the captain of a all-female crew, and basically she wants to take down this kind of evil overlord named Auric, and things happen, and I don't know what else I can say, really. I will probably start spoiling things. But this third book, I gave 4 stars. I gave all the books in the series 4 stars, but the easiest way to describe this is steeped in queerness and feminist revolution, making for a wholly refreshing sci-fi adventure narrative. So it's like, it's a fantasy because it's set in a fantasy world, but it's sci-fi because you have all of these technologies that we don't even have in our times, and it's like adventurous, it's like, it's just amazing. I definitely recommend at least picking up the first book and giving it a try. I will be getting myself a copy of it at some point because I borrowed this from my library. I also listened to the audiobook from my library, but I definitely want to get my hands on a copy of this because I really enjoyed it. I love the characters, I love the world that was created, and just overall all the action and the adventure. Dark Lover by J.R. Ward is next. This, basically, we follow Wrath, who is the leader of the Black Dagger Brotherhood, which is like a group of vampires. And then we follow Beth, who learns that she's a vampire, and the two of them form a relationship. But then there's also other elements, and I fucking suck at describing this, but I give this 3 stars. The only people I gave any care about were Beth and Wrath. Any of these side characters I really didn't like. Well, I liked Fritz the butler and Boo the cat, but like they had very slight appearances. But honestly, I'm going to continue the series because it's a huge series, so I'm going to see if maybe after a couple books it picks up. But based on this first book, I don't know if I'll like the series or not. So yeah. Then I read volume 2 and 3 of the Shades of Magic graphic novels. So Shades of Magic volume 1, The Knight of Knives, and Shades of Magic volume 3, The Rebel Army. I gave both of these 3 stars. These are prequel graphic novels to the main Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. And this essentially follow Maxim Maresh, who is the crown prince of this country. And he ends up moving away from court to a other place, and things happen, and I can't fucking describe this. But these were good. They're like technically comics. I always call them graphic novels, but that's literally because that's what they're labeled as in my spreadsheet, but they're comics. And I normally don't read comics, so I think that's maybe why I enjoyed it slightly less. but also I didn't really connect with any of the characters. I do think my favorite is Knight of Knives because that did have an interesting like trial element. But yeah, it's a series done. I'm wanting to now read the main Shades of Magic series to see if anything from the comics are referenced in that, even though those books takes place like at least 25 years, 25, 30 years after the comic, but I don't know. The next book I read is A Thief Among the Trees by Saba Tahir, Nicole Andelfinger, and Sonia Lau. I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of those names right, but this is a like prequel graphic novel to the An Ember in the Ashes series, and basically in this we follow Helene, Elias, and Tavi, and those are characters from the like main series, where we're seeing like something that happens to them as kids as they're going through what basically they're students at this academy, and they have to go through a bunch of like things that they have to do to become part of the military basically. And it's like it's cute. I love the art style of it. Like it is, I love the art style. Like I love the art style. And it was just fun to see them as like kids, like, and so it's good to kind of see like characters that you know where their story ends go back to seeing where it like towards the beginning. And I will be reading the second one in this series, which follows like Laya and her, like something that happened in her childhood, but I just don't have it because I borrowed this from my library, and my library hasn't shipped out the second one. But I'll be definitely continuing the series because they're fun, quick graphic novels and a really cool art style. The next book I read is The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. This is the second book in the Percy Jackson series, and I gave this 4 stars. There'll be a live show at some point on Morgan from Morgan's Bookshelves channel because both Morgan and I are hosting the Riordan Along, which I'll leave the announcement video linked below. But yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I don't really have any thoughts except I enjoyed it. All of my thoughts will be shared in that live, which I don't know when it's happening. We still need to figure that out. And the final book I read in August, I feel like I've been filming for literally like 2 hours, but the final book I read is Vibe by Liza James, and this I gave 4.5. This essentially, we follow Aura, who at 13 years old, she ran away from the cult that she was raised in, and now we are about 9 years later, where her and her boyfriend go to this like nightclub where Aura meets Ruby, and she is immediately infatuated and immediately interested. And as we go through the story, there are more things that pop up from Aura's past and this cult she was raised in. And it is dark, it is fucked up, it has, obviously, as like trigger warnings for cults, it has trigger warnings for sexual assault, drug use, so many dark things, and I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I loved how Aura and Ruby they're honestly toxic for each other. I'll be honest, they're toxic for each other, but just I loved them so much, and I love how no matter what, they didn't give up on each other, and how it was very much like, we shouldn't be together, but we're going to, and I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I don't really want to talk much more about it because I will then not shut up, and this video is already way too long. So those are the 29 books that I read this month. Holy fuck, nobody let me read this many books without filming a mid-month wrap-up, because I literally think I've been filming for over an hour, if not longer. So this is going to be a very interesting video to edit, I'll tell you that much. But I really hope you enjoyed this wrap-up. Let me know how many books that you read in August, or if you have read any of these. I would love to just hear anything bookish in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and bye!